Okay, so now we're going to continue on with our marketing activities, right? So a little bit of a conversation to have there. We've talked about different techniques, different vehicles, all that sort of thing, previously in the course. But what we now need to start to do is to put ourselves into a position where we can now start to carry out the things that we wish to do. All right, so what we're starting to look at there, when we're talking about marketing activity, the first thing we need to do is come up with a set of priorities. Okay, so what are we prioritizing? Okay, when we're talking about prioritizing, we're saying, we need to put things into a logical and efficient order. Okay, so we know that what needs to happen, when does it need to happen, and in what sequence does it need to happen. Okay, so we start with obviously the most urgent things we need to get sorted out. Okay, so what are the big ticket items we really need to achieve, through to the less urgent, which are the nice to haves. Okay, so we start to think about, what must happen during our campaign and what are the things we'd like to include, but probably, if we had to cut them away, we know what they are. Because obviously time's going to become the biggest factor. All right, we always think we have heaps of time until we start getting into things. And then as other priorities come up, we're going to have to start to balance that and work out where we need to be. So we really need to know the difference between our urgent and our less urgent tasks and how we're going to, how we're going to prioritize, how we're going to rank. What can I throw out? What must I keep? All right. So all we do is we get those, what are the three main things you might have to do, and then everything else underneath that. And you can put those in 1, 2, 3, and then everything underneath that if you want. Just say, look, that's a lot. You don't have to number everything. You can just number the key things, and then say underneath that is a whole bunch of other tasks that we're less worried about. Okay, because what's going to happen is as you start to get into carrying out your activity, other tasks are going to come up, other things that you hadn't necessarily foreseen, and they're all going to start to compete for your attention. All right. So you will start to move along, start prioritizing your event, start to plan your event, start to conduct your event, and that's when you realize that the media vehicle is not the way you want it. Or you now need to come up with new campaign material, or you need to go and get some merchandise ordered, or something else is going to come up there that's going to start to create a conflict within your time planning. Okay, so having some sort of sense of the most important at that time is very clear. Okay, it'll also stop you getting caught up in some of the less value-add things that, they're actually small issues, but they end up taking a whole pile of your time. If you can see they're actually a small issue, you can just start to cut things away. All right, so having that clear, also making sure you got that clarity allows your staff to know what's the most important thing for you, or what's not the most important, so that if you're not necessarily around, that they've got some guidance as to what they can start working on. All right, so if you've got a list that's there that everyone knows where the list is, having that available to them, okay, it gives guidance. Okay, so other people working on your team can pick up your to-do list, they can see what was the most important, they can check where it's up to and progress. All right, so remember, it's about the key task first, and what is the most important thing for you to be doing right now, and being able to give that guidance to other people on your team. The other person that might want some guidance on that is obviously if you need to go up the chain as well to a manager, mentor, or some other person you're working with. Okay, it allows that, them to get some clarity on where you're at. There's a bunch of different tools you can use for prioritizing things. You can use a tick list. You can also plan these things out in like a Gantt chart. You can start to really think about how you want to put it on paper, but make sure that you've got something written, you've got the task prioritized, you've got the most important things at the top, the less important things move down, and then track what you're doing to make sure that you haven't picked up some pet task because and this is what happens with these things, and the reason why we said it is because there's things that we naturally like to do. So what will happen is those things we like to do will start to take up all our time, but although we might like them and they're taking up our time, they're actually not our priority. Our priority can be something else, so we put it off, we put it off, we put it off, and that's when all of a sudden it all comes back at the last minute when we don't have any more time, and then we find there's something critical or major to do, and then we're running around in a blind panic trying to get it done. So make sure you've got a clear set of priorities. Make sure you know what is urgent, what is not urgent. Allow yourself time to work with that. Check back to your task list to make sure you're ticking those things off, and think about what it is that you need to achieve out of your marketing campaign or your marketing activity. Okay, in what order do things need to happen? What's the most important things? What are the things we can do? What are the things we can do without? What are the nice to haves? What are the must haves? Okay, and make sure that you've tracked it out to allow yourself sufficient time to do it. If you've only got a short time window, you might have to make allowances, pick out the key things. If you get more time, then you can plan accordingly and adjust. All right, so that's the first bit, just thinking about your priorities. Okay, so moving back through priorities, we start to think about, what other ways can we look at prioritizing our work? And some of the things we might start to look to prioritize are Things like the balance of our marketing mix. Okay, so now we're not so much looking at time things to prioritize, but where do we see the most important things that we need to be doing? How do we want to structure this? What are some of the activities we're going to be doing? And what's going into that, given that, remember our marketing mix, we're looking at our 4 Ps. Are we prioritising getting the right place? Are we prioritising getting our promotional materials ready? Are we prioritising working on developing the product, understanding the price? So what is it that we're going to start to look at first? And what are those key drivers? Okay, we start to think about, we can prioritise our pricing concerns. Okay, so we might need to think about our pricing. We might need to see if we're competitive in the market. Okay, so this is another thing that we can start to look at and start to say, well, actually, this is going to be the main driver of our activity. Okay, we want to check that out. We might also start to prioritise customer needs and their preferences. Okay, so if I'm starting to balance my business, I might start to say, well, am I more worried about the price or the customer need and preference? Okay, so what's going to be actually driving us? So when we're starting to talk prioritise, we're now talking about priorities of our business, okay, and the way our business works. We start to think about our distribution channels. Okay, we might have multiple, which is going to be our main effort though. Is it our retail stores that's really where we're putting our time, effort and focus, or are we really trying to move to an online model? And that's where we're going for. And then we only have a small footprint on the ground for a retail model. Okay, that instead of having a full-blown retail shop, we might just have a little demonstration showroom or something like that. Or we're going to have the whole online experience. Or do we have massive stores, but actually only a small online delivery platform for those that, if we really can't get them in, we might go that way. So we start to look at that. And then we can actually start to look at, well, how does that balance against our pricing concerns? Are we really worried about the price? Can we afford a big store? Do we need to go for a smaller one to carry that? Okay, so this is where we start to weigh these things up. We also think about levels of customer service. Okay, so I'm a huge one on customer service, and look, it always takes my priority. I'm always thinking about that first. That's always my key driver. My personal view is if you don't get the service right, everything else falls apart. However, I say that, but I've been to several computer stores in Sydney. I won't mention one, but if I go to Apple, I know I go to Apple, my pricing concern better not be so much there. They're going to charge me a little bit more, but my level of customer service will be very good at an Apple store. On the other hand, there is a computer store, one of the cheapest in Sydney, and it is bargain price. But really, as far as customer service, you're lucky if they give you a nod and a grunt. Their staff, literally, if you don't tell them precisely what you want, they won't be suggesting or helping. As far as they're concerned, it's all about price, and dropping the price down as low as possible. They've got a few stores in cheap locations. They're all about dropping that price down, but the level of customer service is not existent. That just is not a concern for them. It is certainly not a marketing activity they're concerned with. They are completely done on price, and that's it. And their promotional activities, which is the last thing we might look at, also not really there. Okay, so as a customer, I know that if there's any questions I want to have, any conversations I want to have, it's up to the premium Apple store where, customer needs and preference are really what's driving them. They're not so worried about the pricing concerns because their customers are fine with that. They really want to offer this, and that's really what they do. And good distribution channels, nice website, nice physical place. But they've probably not concerned themselves as much with the price. On the other hand, these other people I'm talking about, whose names shall remain nameless, they're really about just dropping the price down as low as possible, stack it high, sell them cheap. As long as the customers know precisely what they want, the customers can get pretty much what they need. But that's about all they really do well. Okay, cool. So that's really starting to think about other things that we can prioritize. So the first one was really about our time, our focus, the activities we're doing, and this one is about thinking about where in my business I need to be. Okay, cool. Okay, so other things that we can start to prioritize. Okay, so other priorities there that we can start to think about are a few other sort of interesting bits, which is really about we can prioritize our monitoring systems. And one of the things that we might want to do is monitor and evaluate activities. So that's on a sort of a higher level. We can start to think about, how do we keep an eye on new opportunities that are presenting themselves? Okay, so in our business, how often do we want to be looking at that? To be scanning the market actively or passively, looking for new activities where we can get involved and start to develop ourselves. Okay, we can also look at the staff input. Okay, so when it actually starts coming down to monitoring marketing activities or being involved with them, how are we tracking how our staff relate to that? Okay, how do they get involved? What input are they having? What suggestions are they making? What progress they're making towards driving those things? Okay, so there's quite a lot there that we can start talking about. Well, how are we going to focus on the staff input? The other thing we start to look at there is, further to this, which is what's our market research methodology? Okay, we can also have an evaluation system or some sort of planning, schedule, or priority about, what are our preferred tools to research our market? Is it a more passive thing? Are we dedicating resources to it? If we're going to dedicate resources to it, where are those resources going to come from and where are we going to take them from in our organisation? Okay, if I've only got 5 people and I'm dedicating one person to doing this, well, what is it that they're not going to be doing? Okay, so don't try and use the same person for 5 different things because they're just going to get really scattered. How am I targeting them and what am I telling them every day they really need to pay attention to? If there's 2 things there that are competing for their time, which one do I want them on? Okay, so moving on for this is opportunities for change. Okay, so how am I prioritising that, my opportunities for change? Because opportunities for change come up all the time. It can be customer feedback that comes in. It can be a new development in an industry, okay? And quite often we'll get more than one, okay? So they'll come through and we'll be going, I could take this choice or I could take this choice or I could take this choice. Well, how are we going to guide that decision? Either as you as a personal decision maker, how are you going to balance that in your own mind to say, well, I'm going to take this and this is why. All right, we don't want to throw it out to the hands of the heavens. We want to be able to go, this is the decision I'm going to make. This is where I've got my information from, which is usually my market research method. This is how I'm going to monitor and evaluate what's going on, but this is the ultimate decision I want to make. And come up with some sort of way to justify what you're doing. Okay, so prioritising those things all the time. That obviously leads into opportunities for improvement. Okay, and this becomes the next thing that you're going to weigh up against there. Do I want to actually change what I'm doing, or do I just need to improve what I'm doing? Okay, when I say change, does it need to be a radical shift, or can I just improve something, which means taking a minor shift? Okay, so what's our preference? How are we going to tie that together? And more to the point, that ties into our performance targets. Okay, that's another thing we can start to prioritise. What are we saying the key areas that we're identifying for performance are in our business? Is it our sales numbers are right? Is it our teamwork numbers are right? Is it our productivity is right? What's the key part for us? Okay, so all these different things that we've been looking at, you can track them individually and start to think about, well, what are my opportunities for improvement and how do I categorise? What are my market research methods and categorise? How do I track performance and categorise? But then, do I need to spend my time doing performance management? Do I need to spend my time doing market research? Do I need to spend my time, monitoring and evaluating activities? So of all those things that I can categorise, I need to categorise those too and about in which order I want to spend my time. So as a manager, I need to think, am I out there trying to scan and push to get further information and prioritising all that sort of monitoring, research, etc.? Or am I sort of stepping back to some degree and managing my team while they do those tasks? So where do you want to spend your time? What are the things that you're going to measure? And even when you're measuring those things, underneath that, what are the priorities in that for you? Really, if it's about me trying to develop my customer service skills and develop that area, as a manager, I want to make sure that we're looking for opportunities for change and opportunities for improvement, but I need my staff doing that. For me, my priority is doing performance analysis of the targets and seeing how we've set them the task and making sure they're doing those. So if they do their bit, and they're out there scanning that, then I'll actually achieve the bigger business picture. But that's going to come down to your preferences and how you see you spending your day. But start to think about, writing these things down and having a clear guideline. Because when you need to step away and someone needs to step in behind you, they need to know what you want them spending their time on. So they end up spending a whole lot of time on something that's their preference or their interest, not actually achieving what it is that you need to achieve in your business. So write them down, set your priorities, give a bit of a reason why, make sure everyone understands what's happening, do up any charts, tick sheets, whatever you need to do, and then start thinking about how that's going to go together, because we're about to start moving into a marketing activity with a whole lot of things moving very quickly, and we need to know where it is we want to spend our time, our budget, and just our general effort and energy. All right, great.